The doctors never hesitated. They told Kang Min-Jae the damage was permanent, that his body would never betray him with hope, that children were impossible. So when the woman he loved stood in front of him trembling, whispering that she was pregnant, he didn't ask questions. He made a decision. He chose certainty over love, and he destroyed her. 5 years passed. 5 years of silence, power, control. 5 years of believing he'd buried the only mistake that ever mattered. Until one rainy afternoon in Los Angeles when he saw 2 boys arguing over a soccer ball and felt his blood turn cold. Same eyes, same face, same impossible truth staring back at him. The world he'd built on certainty began to crack. Because what happens when the one thing you are absolutely sure about turns out to be a lie? And what happens when the children you swore could never exist are suddenly calling another man dad? This isn't a story about wealth, or crime, or power. It's a story about pride, about regret that arrives late, and about a man who learns, too late, that the most dangerous lie isn't the one you tell others, it's the one you tell yourself. Min-Jae had built an empire on control. His tailored black suits, the intricate tattoos that crawled up his neck like dark vines, the reputation that preceded him in every room, all of it carefully constructed to project invincibility. In his world, weakness meant death. Uncertainty meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant you were already gone. So when 3 doctors in Seoul delivered their verdict with clinical precision, he accepted it the way he accepted every hard truth in his life, with a cold, silent nod. He was 19 years old. The internal injuries from his father's discipline had been extensive. The prognosis was clear. He would never father children. Min-Jae didn't cry. He didn't rage. He simply locked that truth away in the same place he kept all the other scars. Deep enough that it couldn't touch him, couldn't make him weak. For 15 years, that certainty defined him. It shaped every decision, every relationship, every carefully calculated risk. He built his father's criminal dynasty into an international force, expanded operations from Seoul to Singapore to Los Angeles, and never once allowed himself to imagine a different future. Until Hannah. She wasn't supposed to happen. She was warmth in a world of steel, laughter in rooms that only knew silence. A volunteer coordinator at a Beverly Hills charity gala who didn't recognize the quiet, well-dressed man asking her about wine pairings as one of the most dangerous men in 2 hemispheres. She argued with him. She challenged him. She didn't fear him. That was dangerous in all the wrong ways. They married 3 months after they met. His family hated her. She wasn't strategic. She wasn't useful. She was love. And love, in Min-Jae's world, was the greatest weakness of all. But for 12 perfect weeks, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have both. The empire and the woman, the power and the peace. Then she stood in their marble kitchen in their Malibu estate, holding a pregnancy test with shaking hands, and whispered 2 words that shattered everything. "I'm pregnant." The doctor's voices echoed louder than her trembling confession. Impossible. Min-Jae didn't shout. He didn't strike. He simply looked at the woman he loved, the woman who'd somehow slipped past every defense he'd ever built, and made a choice. Pride over love, certainty over faith. He called her a liar once. Only once. But it cut deeper than any weapon he'd ever used. Security escorted her out within the hour. Cards cancelled, phone numbers blocked. By sunset, Hannah Brooks ceased to exist in his world. She slept in her car in Santa Monica that first night, one hand on her stomach, tears streaming silently down her face, as she realized the man she'd married had never really existed at all. 5 years later, she owned a tiny cafe in Pasadena called Second Chances. She lived in the small apartment above it and raised twin boys who asked too many questions. Why don't we have a dad? Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart. She never said his name, and Min-Jae never looked back. He told himself he'd made the right choice, the only choice. He buried the memory of Hannah the same way he'd buried every other moment of weakness in his life, deep enough that it couldn't touch him, until today. Until the rain started falling in Griffith Park, and he saw two 5-year-old boys arguing over a soccer ball, and the world he'd built on absolute certainty began to crumble beneath his feet. Because one of them turned his head, and Min-Jae saw his own face staring back at him from 25 years ago. Same sharp jawline. Same intense dark eyes, same expression of stubborn determination. His hands started shaking, his breath caught. And for the first time in 15 years, Kang Min-Jae felt something he'd trained himself never to feel. Fear. Not of enemies, not of rivals, but of the truth. The children he swore could never exist were real. They were alive, and they were calling another man Dad. Seoul, South Korea, 15 years ago. The hospital walls were too white. Kang Min-Jae sat in the examination room with his hands folded in his lap, knuckles still bruised from the previous night. At 19, he'd already learned that stillness was a form of armor. Movement revealed emotion. Emotion revealed weakness. And weakness, in his father's house, was punished swiftly. Dr. Park adjusted his glasses and studied the scans on the light board with the detached precision of a man who delivered bad news for a living. "The damage is extensive," he said finally. "The repeated trauma to your lower abdomen and pelvic region has resulted in permanent scarring to the vas deferens. Additionally, there's evidence of testicular trauma that's compromised sperm production." Min-Jae's expression didn't change. He watched the doctor the way he watched everything, with careful, measured attention, looking for weaknesses, cataloging information. "In plain terms, Mr. Kang," Dr. Park continued, "natural conception will be impossible. I'm sorry." The second doctor, a younger woman with kind eyes, leaned forward. "There are options, of course. As medical technology advances—" "No options," Min-Jae interrupted quietly. His English was perfect, sharpened by years at international schools his father used to launder money and build connections. "Just certainty." Dr. Park nodded slowly. "Then yes, certainty. You will not father children." Min-Jae stood. The movement was fluid, controlled. "Thank you for your time." He left the hospital and walked into the crowded streets of Gangnam, letting the chaos of Seoul wash over him. Teenagers laughed outside a convenience store. A mother scolded her young son for running too far ahead. Businessmen hurried past with briefcases and worried expressions. Normal lives, normal futures. Min-Jae had never expected normal. His father, Kang Dae-jung, ran one of Seoul's most feared criminal organizations, a network that stretched from gambling and extortion to international money laundering and arms trafficking. Min-Jae had been raised inside that world, trained since childhood to be ruthless, strategic, untouchable. The beatings had started when he was 7. His father called it conditioning, building tolerance for pain, eliminating emotional weakness, teaching him that survival meant control over himself, over others, over every variable, in every situation. By 12, Min-Jae could take a punch without flinching. By 15, he could give orders that ended lives. By 19, he was his father's most valuable asset, cold, brilliant, and utterly loyal. The infertility diagnosis should have devastated him. His father certainly saw it that way. When Min-Jae reported the results that evening, Daijong's face had darkened with barely restrained rage. "Defective," the old man spat. "Even your body betrays weakness." But Min-Jae felt something unexpected. Relief. Children meant vulnerability. They were leverage. Targets. In his world, they were weapons enemies used against you. His own childhood had taught him that lesson brutally and thoroughly. If he couldn't have children, he couldn't be hurt that way. It was freedom, in its own twisted logic. He buried the diagnosis deep in his mind, told no one else, and threw himself into the work. Over the next decade, he transformed his father's organization from a regional powerhouse into an international operation. He established connections in Singapore, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and eventually Los Angeles. He learned to speak 5 languages fluently. He studied law, finance, and psychology. He became a ghost in expensive suits, present at every major negotiation, every critical decision, but never leaving fingerprints, never appearing in photographs that mattered. By the time he was 34, he effectively ran the entire organization. His father was still the public face, still barked orders and made threats, but the real power had shifted. Min-Jae controlled the money, the connections, the future, and he'd never once regretted his inability to have children. Not until he met her. Beverly Hills, California, 5 years ago. The charity gala was exactly the kind of event Min-Jae usually avoided. Too many people, too much noise, too many smiling faces hiding calculated intentions. But his Los Angeles operations required certain appearances. Legitimacy was purchased through philanthropy and public visibility, and his accountants had suggested a significant donation to the Children's Healthcare Foundation would provide useful tax benefits while building his respectable businessman cover. So he attended, wearing a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit and an expression of polite disinterest that discouraged conversation. The Beverly Hilton ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes. Doctors and executives networked near the silent auction tables. Actresses and influencers posed for photographers. Money and power circulated through the room like currency, everyone trading value, everyone calculating worth. Min-Jae stood near the bar, nursing a glass of wine he had no intention of finishing, when a woman's voice cut through the ambient noise. "That's the Chateau Margaux, 2009. It's gorgeous, but personally, I think the 2005 has more complexity." He turned. She was beautiful, but that wasn't what struck him first. Los Angeles was full of beautiful women. What caught his attention was the complete absence of calculation in her smile. She wasn't sizing him up, wasn't angling for anything. She was just making conversation about wine. "You know your Bordeaux," he said carefully. She laughed. "I know how to read the cards they put next to the bottles. I'm Hannah. I'm with the foundation, volunteer coordinator." She extended her hand. Her grip was firm, confident, warm. "Min-Jae, are you here with someone? Or are you doing what I'm doing, hiding from the networking?" He found himself almost smiling. The latter. Thank God. She grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a passing server and handed him one. "These things are exhausting. Everyone's trying so hard to impress everyone else that nobody's actually having a conversation." "Then why volunteer?" "Because between all the posturing, we raised $2 million tonight that's going to help sick kids. That's worth suffering through small talk with hedge fund managers who think Pinot Noir is a personality trait." Min-Jae did smile then, actually smile. It felt strange on his face. They talked for an hour. She told him about growing up in Portland, studying social work at UC Berkeley, moving to Los Angeles because she'd wanted to make a difference in a city that desperately needed it. She talked about her work with homeless youth, her tiny apartment in Koreatown, her collection of rescue dogs. She asked him thoughtful questions about his import-export business and didn't push when his answers were vague. She debated him about Korean cinema. She loved Parasite and thought Oldboy was overrated, and held her own when he challenged her opinions. She was sharp, genuine, unafraid, and she had no idea who he really was. "Can I see you again?" he asked when the gala was ending. Hannah tilted her head, studying him with those warm brown eyes. "Are you going to tell me what you really do for a living?" "Import-export," he said evenly. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England." She pulled out her phone. "But sure. You seem like you could use more people in your life who aren't afraid of you. Fair warning, though, I'm chronically optimistic. I cry during commercials, and I believe most problems can be solved with good coffee and honest conversation." "That sounds dangerous." "Probably." She grinned. "Your number?" He gave it to her. She texted him immediately. "This is Hannah, the woman who's going to make you laugh more. Fair warning." Over the next 3 months, she kept that promise. They met for coffee in Silver Lake, walked through LACMA looking at art, drove up the Pacific Coast Highway to Santa Barbara for no reason except to watch the sunset. She introduced him to her friends, activists, artists, teachers, people who lived on modest incomes and cared deeply about things Min-Jae had spent decades learning not to care about. She asked him about his childhood once. He told her the sanitized version: strict father, high expectations, military-style discipline. She didn't push for more. She told him about her own past. Parents killed in a car accident when she was 12, raised by an aunt who did her best, but never quite knew what to do with a grieving child. How she'd learned to find family in unexpected places, to build connections that mattered. "I think people underestimate the power of chosen family," she said one evening as they sat on Venice Beach watching the waves. "Blood doesn't make you loyal. Love does." Min-Jae wanted to tell her she was wrong. That blood and fear were the only reliable currencies. That love made you vulnerable. But sitting next to her, feeling her warmth, hearing her laugh, he couldn't bring himself to say it. He proposed on a random Tuesday. They were in his Malibu estate. He'd finally shown her the place after weeks of meeting in public spaces and her small apartment. She'd walked through the marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows with an expression of amused disbelief. "This is where you live?" "Min-Jae, this place is enormous." "What do you even do with all this space?" "I don't know," he admitted. "It came with the territory." She turned to face him, and something in her expression shifted, softened. "You're lonely," she said quietly. "Aren't you?" No one had ever said that to him before. No one had ever seen it. "Marry me," he said. Hannah blinked. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, more certain now than he'd been about anything in years. "I know it's fast. I know it's impulsive. But I've spent my entire life being careful and strategic, and I'm tired of it. You make me feel like I could be someone different, someone better." "Min-Jae, you don't have to answer now, but think about it. Please." She studied his face for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and kissed him. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, you ridiculous, lonely man. Yes." They were married 3 weeks later, in a small ceremony at the Malibu courthouse. Hannah wore a simple white dress she'd bought at a boutique on Melrose. Min-Jae wore his finest suit. They had no guests except the court-appointed witnesses. He didn't tell his family. His father found out anyway. Dae-jung called from Seoul, his voice cold with fury. You married an American, a nobody, a woman with no connections, no use to the organization. I married someone I love, Min-Jae said quietly. Love. His father spat the word like poison. Love is for weaklings. You were supposed to be better than this. I am better than this, Min-Jae replied. Better than you. He hung up. For 12 weeks he believed it. Believed he could keep both worlds separate. Believed Hannah would never have to know what he really was. Believed love could be enough. Then she stood in their kitchen holding a pregnancy test, and reality crashed back in. The morning started like any other. Min-Jae woke early, worked out in the estate's private gym, and reviewed reports from his operations managers in Tokyo and Singapore. Hannah slept late. She'd been exhausted lately, sleeping through her alarms, dozing off on the couch during movies. He'd suggested she see a doctor. She'd laughed it off as stress from her new job coordinating a youth shelter expansion in downtown LA. When he came upstairs after his morning calls, she was standing in the bathroom doorway. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking, and she was holding a small plastic stick. Min-Jae, she whispered. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Min-Jae heard the words, but they didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. The medical verdict had been absolute. 3 doctors, multiple tests, 15 years of certainty. Impossible. Say something, Hannah breathed. Her eyes were wide, frightened, hopeful. Please say something. His mind raced through possibilities with the cold precision he applied to business problems. She was lying. She'd been with someone else. This was a trap, an angle, a manipulation. But Hannah wasn't like that. She didn't play games. She didn't lie. Which meant the alternative was worse. She thought he didn't know. Thought he was capable. Thought this child could actually be his. How far along? He asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, flat, controlled, empty. I don't know, maybe 6 weeks. I took 3 tests. They're all positive. She moved toward him, reaching for his hand. I know we haven't talked about kids. I know this is sudden. But Min-Jae, it's not mine. The words landed like bullets. Hannah froze. What? The child isn't mine. He met her eyes, and he saw the exact moment his certainty cut through her hope. I can't have children, Hannah. Medical fact. So whoever's child you're carrying, it isn't mine. Her face went white. Min-Jae, that's not. I haven't been with anyone else. You're the only. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. Her voice cracked. You're the only man I've been with in over a year. This is your baby. Impossible. He turned away from her, staring out the windows at the Pacific Ocean. His hands were steady. His voice was steady. Everything inside him was screaming. I was diagnosed at 19. Multiple doctors, multiple tests, permanent damage. I cannot father children. Then they were wrong. They weren't wrong. Min-Jae, please. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Just listen to me. I don't know what those doctors told you, but medical diagnoses can be wrong. Things can heal. Bodies can surprise us. I am pregnant, and you are the father. That's the truth. He should have heard the desperation in her voice, should have seen the terror in her eyes, should have remembered that Hannah had never lied to him, never played games, never asked him for anything except honesty. But all he could hear were the doctors' voices from 15 years ago. Impossible. And all he could feel was the cold, familiar certainty that had defined his entire life. People lied. Love made you vulnerable. Trust got you killed. Get out. What? He turned to face her, and he forced every emotion down into the locked box where he kept all his weaknesses. His face was a mask. His voice was steel. "Get out of my house. Take whatever you can carry. The rest stays here." "Min-Jae, you can't." "I can. I am." He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. "Security will be here in 5 minutes to escort you out. If you try to contact me again, I'll have you arrested for harassment. If you try to claim this child is mine, I'll have you exposed as a fraud." "You don't mean this." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You love me." "I thought I did," he said quietly. "But I don't love liars." The words destroyed her. He watched it happen, watched the woman he'd married crumble in front of him, watched hope drain from her face and leave only devastation behind. And he felt nothing, or told himself he felt nothing. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "No," he said. "I made a mistake marrying you. This is correction." Security arrived. 2 men he trusted, professionals who didn't ask questions. They guided Hannah, gently, respectfully, toward the door. She grabbed a suitcase from the bedroom closet, threw in clothes with shaking hands, and let them escort her out. She looked back once, met his eyes across the marble foyer. "I hope you're right," she said softly. "Because if you're wrong, you're going to spend the rest of your life regretting this." Then she was gone. Min-Jae stood in the empty house and told himself he'd made the right choice. The only choice. He'd been weak, let emotion cloud judgment, allowed himself to be vulnerable. He wouldn't make that mistake again. He called his accountant and had all her cards cancelled. Her phone disconnected. Her name removed from every account and document. By sunset, Hannah Brooks legally ceased to exist in his world. Then he poured himself a drink, stood on the deck watching the ocean, and buried the memory of her the same way he'd buried every other moment of weakness in his life. Deep enough that it couldn't touch him. Deep enough that he could believe the lie he told himself, that he'd done the right thing. That certainty mattered more than love, that he would never, ever regret sending her away. Santa Monica, California, day 1. Hannah sat in her car in a grocery store parking lot and watched the sunset through her windshield. She had $300 in cash, a suitcase full of clothes, and a pregnancy test that proved she was telling the truth. Not that the truth mattered. She'd tried calling Min-Jae 17 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. She'd tried texting. Messages showed as undelivered. She'd driven back to the Malibu estate, but security had stopped her at the gate. "Mr. Kang has instructed us to inform you that any further contact attempts will be considered criminal harassment," the guard had said. He'd looked uncomfortable delivering the message. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you need to leave." So she left. She spent that first night in her car, parked near the beach, listening to the waves and trying to understand how her entire life had collapsed in less than 4 hours. The man she'd married, the man who'd proposed on a random Tuesday, the man who'd looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. That man was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed at all. She cried until she had no tears left. Then she made a list on the back of a receipt, things she knew, things she needed to do, ways to survive. She knew she was pregnant. She knew the baby was Min-Jae's, no matter what he believed. She knew she had no family to turn to. Her aunt had passed away 2 years earlier. She knew her friends were kind but struggling themselves, no one in a position to take in a homeless pregnant woman. She needed money, a place to stay, medical care, a plan. She sold her car the next day, a used Toyota that Min-Jae had insisted she drive instead of the luxury vehicles in his garage. It gave her $4,000. She found a room for rent in a shared apartment in Koreatown. $300 a month, no questions asked. Shared kitchen and bathroom. She worked 3 jobs. Morning shifts at a coffee shop in Los Feliz, afternoon shifts at a bookstore in Pasadena, evening shifts doing data entry from the cramped desk in her rented room. She was exhausted all the time. Morning sickness hit hard. By her second trimester, she could barely keep food down. But she survived. At 5 months, an ultrasound revealed twins. Hannah sat in the free clinic in East LA and stared at the grainy black and white images on the screen. 2 tiny heads, 2 tiny hearts beating. "Twins?" she whispered. The technician smiled. "Congratulations, 2 healthy boys." Hannah started crying right there in the examination room. Not from fear, not from despair, from something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She might have lost everything, but she was about to gain something infinitely more valuable. 2 children who would love her. 2 children she would love back. 2 children who would never know their father had thrown them away before they were even born. She worked until she couldn't anymore, until her ankles swelled so badly she couldn't stand through full shifts, until the bookstore manager gently suggested she take maternity leave. "You need to rest," the woman had said kindly. "Those babies need you healthy." Hannah had wanted to explain that rest meant no income, no food, no rent. But the manager had pressed an envelope into her hand, $2,000 from a collection the staff had taken up. "We take care of each other here." The twins were born on a Tuesday in October at County USC Medical Center. Labor lasted 19 hours. Hannah had no one in the delivery room except a tired but compassionate nurse who held her hand through the contractions and whispered encouragement. "You're doing beautifully, honey. Almost there. Just a little more." When the first baby cried, a strong, angry wail that filled the room, Hannah sobbed with relief. When the second one followed 3 minutes later, equally loud, equally perfect, she felt something inside her click into place. Purpose, identity, future. "Do you have names picked out?" the nurse asked as she placed both boys in Hannah's arms. Hannah looked down at their tiny faces. They had Min-Jae's sharp features already, his strong jaw, his intense eyes. They were beautiful and impossible, and hers. "James," she whispered, "and Michael. Those are good, strong names." "They're going to need strong names," Hannah said softly, "because I'm raising them alone." The first year was brutal. She lived in a studio apartment in Highland Park, 400 square feet with a Murphy bed, a kitchenette, and a bathroom the size of a closet. She worked from home, doing freelance grant writing for non-profits, squeezing in work during nap times and after the boys went to sleep. She learned to change diapers one-handed while typing with the other. Learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep. Learned to stretch $20 into a week's worth of groceries. She had no social life, no time for friends, no energy for anything except survival. But the boys thrived. James was the quiet one, observant, thoughtful, always studying the world with those intense dark eyes. Michael was louder, more demanding, always wanting attention and interaction. They both walked early, talked early, asked questions constantly. "Mama, why is the sky blue? Mama, where do birds go at night? Mama, why don't we have a dad?" That last question came when they were 3, watching other families at the park in Griffith Park. A father was pushing his daughter on the swings, both of them laughing. Hannah knelt down between her sons and chose her words carefully. Some families have a mom and a dad. Some families have 2 moms or 2 dads. And some families have just one parent who loves their children more than anything in the world. We're the last kind. "But why?" James asked seriously. "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," she said softly. And sometimes those mistakes mean families look different than people expect. But different doesn't mean bad. It just means different. Michael frowned. Did our dad make a mistake? Hannah's throat tightened. Yes, baby. He did. But his mistake gave me you too. So maybe it wasn't a mistake after all. By the time the twins turned 4, Hannah had saved enough money to pursue a dream she'd been nurturing in the exhausted corners of her mind. Opening a cafe. She found a small space in Pasadena, a former dry cleaner's shop with good bones and cheap rent. She maxed out 3 credit cards, called in every favor she had, and spent 6 months renovating it herself. She painted the walls cream and sage green, installed second-hand bookcases and filled them with donated books, created a menu focused on simple, excellent coffee and homemade pastries. She called it Second Chances. The cafe opened on a rainy Tuesday. 12 people showed up. By the end of the first month, she was breaking even. By the end of the first year, she was making a modest profit. She moved into the small apartment above the cafe. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room that doubled as a dining room. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The twins attended the public elementary school 3 blocks away. They made friends easily. They brought home artwork that Hannah hung on every available wall. They asked fewer questions about their father. Hannah built a life that didn't include Min-Jae. She dated occasionally, a teacher she met at the twins' school, a customer who came in every morning for a cappuccino. But nothing stuck. She couldn't quite shake the feeling that trusting someone meant risking devastation, so she focused on her sons, on her business, on the quiet, steady rhythm of survival. She never spoke Min-Jae's name. She never told the boys who their father was. She buried that memory the same way he'd buried her, deep enough that it couldn't touch her daily life, couldn't poison the good things she'd built from nothing. But sometimes, late at night when the cafe was closed and the boys were sleeping and the city was quiet, she'd look at their faces and see Min-Jae staring back at her. Same sharp jawline, same intense eyes, same expression of stubborn determination. And she'd wonder if somewhere in Los Angeles he ever thought about her, if he ever regretted the choice he'd made, if he ever realized what he'd thrown away. Griffith Park, Los Angeles. Present day. Rain in Los Angeles always felt unnatural. Min-Jae sat in the back of his black Mercedes, watching water stream down the windows while his driver navigated toward a property he was considering purchasing in Los Feliz. The real estate market in LA had been profitable lately, buying distressed properties, renovating them, selling them at significant markup, legitimate business that laundered money beautifully. "Sir, the appointment isn't for another hour," his driver said. "Would you like to stop somewhere?" "Griffith Park," Min-Jae said absently. "I'll walk." The driver looked uncertain. Rain, expensive suit, unscheduled stop, but knew better than to question. He pulled into the parking area near the soccer fields. Min-Jae stepped out into the drizzle. The park was nearly empty. A few joggers braved the weather. A woman walked 2 dogs near the tree line, and on the soccer field, a small group of children played, despite the rain, their laughter carrying across the wet grass. He was about to turn back to the car when he heard it. "Michael, pass it. I'm open." A child's voice, high, excited, demanding. Min-Jae's head turned automatically. 2 boys on the field, both around 5 years old, arguing over a soccer ball. One was trying to steal it from the other. They were drenched, muddy, completely absorbed in their game. Something about them made him stop. The way they moved, the shape of their faces, the intensity in their expressions. One of the boys looked up, scanning the field for someone to pass to, and Min-Jae's world stopped. It was like looking into a mirror from 25 years ago. Same sharp jawline, Same wide-set dark eyes, same expression of fierce concentration. The boy's hair was plastered to his forehead by rain, his clothes were soaked, and he was grinning with pure joy. Min-Jae couldn't breathe. The other boy turned then, and the resemblance doubled. Twins. They were twins, both with his features, his bone structure, his expressions. Impossible. His hands started shaking, his vision narrowed. The world tilted sideways. "Boys, time to go." A woman's voice, familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. She emerged from a covered area near the playground, late 20s, black, with short natural hair, and an expression of patient exhaustion. She was carrying 2 jackets and waving the boys over. Hannah. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her clothes were simple: jeans, a raincoat, worn sneakers. But it was unmistakably her. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd thrown away, the woman carrying his children. The boys ran toward her, arguing about the game. "I totally had it." "You did not. I was going to score." Hannah laughed. That same warm, genuine laugh that had first caught his attention 5 years ago. "It's a tie. Now let's get you home before you both catch pneumonia." She helped them into their jackets, ruffled their wet hair, and guided them toward the parking lot. Min-Jae stood frozen behind a tree line, his expensive suit soaking through, his world crumbling around him. The diagnosis had been wrong. 15 years of certainty, shattered in a single moment. The children were real. They were alive. They were his. And he'd thrown them away before they were even born. He watched Hannah buckle the boys into an old Honda. Not the car he'd made her sell 5 years ago, but something even older, more beat up. She drove away without looking back, and Min-Jae stood in the rain until his driver approached cautiously. "Sir, the appointment?" "Cancel it." His voice sounded strange, hollow. "Cancel everything today." He got back in the car and gave his driver an address he'd deleted from his phone 5 years ago. The apartment building in Highland Park was exactly as modest as he expected. 15 units, paint peeling, chain-link fence around a small courtyard. Hannah's Honda was parked in a numbered space. Min-Jae sat across the street in his Mercedes and watched. Lights came on in a third-floor apartment. Through thin curtains, he saw movement. The boys changing out of wet clothes, Hannah moving between rooms, the mundane, chaotic rhythm of family life, his family, the life he'd destroyed because he'd been too proud to question his own certainty. He pulled out his phone and called a number he used only for sensitive investigations. "Mr. Kang," the private investigator answered immediately. "How can I help?" "I need information on Hannah Brooks. Last known address, Highland Park, Los Angeles. Age 29. I need to know everything. Where she works, where she lives, what she does. I need to know about her children, names, ages, medical records if possible. And I need it quietly. Time frame? 24 hours. Consider it done." Min-Jae hung up and stared at the apartment building for another 2 hours. Watched the lights go off one by one. Watched the windows go dark. He'd built an empire on control, on certainty, on the absolute conviction that he knew the truth and everyone else was lying. And he'd been wrong about the most important thing in his life. The children he'd sworn could never exist were calling another man Dad. The woman he'd loved was raising them alone, in poverty, in a neighborhood he wouldn't have let his lowest-level employees live in. Because he'd made a choice 5 years ago, based on pride. And now he had to live with the consequences. But first, he needed to know everything. Needed to understand what he'd missed, what he'd destroyed, what might still be salvageable. if anything was salvageable at all. He drove back to his Malibu estate in silence and spent the night on the deck, staring at the ocean, replaying every moment from that terrible day 5 years ago. Hannah's face when he'd called her a liar, her voice when she'd said, "You're making a mistake," her eyes when she'd looked back at him one last time. "I hope you're right. Because if you're wrong, you're going to spend the rest of your life regretting this." She'd been right. He was wrong. And the regret was going to kill him. The private investigator's report arrived exactly 24 hours later. Min-Jae sat in his home office and read it 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of his failure. Subject: Hannah Brooks. Age 29. Current address: Unit 3C, 4782, Meridian Street, Highland Park, Los Angeles. Employment: owner, operator, Second Chances Cafe, 891 E Colorado, Boulevard, Pasadena. Est. Annual income $47,000. Children: James Brooks, 5, and Michael Brooks, 5, born October 17th, 5 years prior at County USC Medical Center. Birth certificate lists father as unknown. Education: James and Michael attend Madison Elementary School, Pasadena, both in kindergarten, both reading above grade level. Medical history: Hannah delivered twins via emergency C-section after 19 hours of labor. No complications. Both boys healthy. Routine pediatric care, all vaccinations up to date. No evidence of medical neglect. Financial status: no outstanding debts. Pays rent on time. Lives modestly but within means. Cafe is profitable but margins are thin. No luxury purchases. No evidence of financial support from any other party. Social connections: active in local community. Volunteers at Madison Elementary. Member of Pasadena Small Business Association. No romantic relationships in past 18 months. Additional notes: subject has built stable life from extremely difficult circumstances. Demonstrates strong work ethic and dedication to children's welfare. No indication of substance abuse, neglect, or instability. Children appear well-adjusted and cared for. Min-Jae set the report down and called his personal physician in Seoul. "Dr. Park, this is Kang Min-Jae. I need you to locate my medical records from 15 years ago, the fertility diagnosis." There was a pause. "Mr. Kang, I can certainly retrieve those records, but may I ask why?" "I have children," Min-Jae said flatly. "So either the diagnosis was wrong, or I need to understand what changed." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll review the files and call you back within the hour." Min-Jae hung up and walked to the windows overlooking the Pacific. The ocean was calm today, reflecting perfect blue sky. Beautiful, indifferent. His phone rang 40 minutes later. "Mr. Kang," Dr. Park's voice was careful. "I've reviewed your original files from 15 years ago. And?" "The diagnosis was correct at the time. The imaging showed significant damage from repeated trauma. However," the doctor hesitated, "in rare cases, particularly in younger patients, the body can heal beyond initial expectations. Scar tissue can remodel. Function can return, at least partially." "How rare?" "Very rare. Perhaps 1 in 50 cases. We don't typically follow up with patients who receive this diagnosis unless they specifically request it, so the data is limited. You told me it was permanent. Based on the evidence at the time, it was the most likely outcome. I'm sorry if..." Min-Jae hung up. He stood there for a long time, letting the truth settle into his bones. The doctors had been wrong. His body had healed, and he'd destroyed his family because he'd believed medicine over love, because he'd chosen certainty over faith. because he'd been too proud to consider that he might not know everything. He called his personal attorney. "I need you to prepare paperwork for a paternity test. Legal, airtight, no possibility of challenge. Mr. Kang, if you're dealing with a potential paternity suit, I'm not defending, I'm proving." His voice was ice. "I have twin 5-year-old sons. I need documentation that will hold up in any court." "I see. And the mother?" "I'll handle her." He drove to Pasadena that afternoon. Second Chance's cafe was exactly what he expected. Small, charming, personal. The walls were painted warm colors. Bookshelves lined one side. A chalkboard menu listed drinks and pastries with prices that made Min-Jae wince. She was barely charging enough to cover costs. Hannah was behind the counter, making a cappuccino for a customer. She smiled as she handed it over, made small talk, laughed at something the man said. She still had that warmth, that genuine kindness, and Min-Jae was about to destroy it all over again. He waited until the customer left, until the cafe was empty except for one student studying in the corner, headphones on. Then he walked to the counter. Hannah looked up from wiping down the espresso machine and froze. All the color drained from her face. The cloth slipped from her hand. She gripped the counter like she might fall. "Hello, Hannah," Min-Jae said quietly. She couldn't speak, just stared at him like he was a ghost, which, in a sense, he was. "I saw them," he continued, "in Griffith Park, 2 days ago. The boys." Hannah's eyes went wide with panic. Then something shifted. Some kind of protective fury taking over the shock. "Get out! Hannah, get out of my cafe." Her voice was shaking but fierce. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up after 5 years and—" "They're mine." The words hung in the air like smoke. "I had the medical records reviewed," Min-Jae said. "The diagnosis was wrong. My body healed. The children are mine." Hannah laughed. It was a broken, bitter sound. "Now you believe me? Now? After 5 years?" "I was wrong. You destroyed me." She wasn't yelling. That would have been easier. Instead, her voice was quiet, devastated, raw. "I told you the truth, and you called me a liar. You threw me out with nothing. I slept in my car, Min-Jae. I was pregnant with your children, and I slept in my car. I know. You know." Her voice cracked. "You know. Then what are you doing here? You made your choice." "I want to meet them." "No. Hannah, no." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "You don't get to meet them. You don't get to be their father. You gave up that right when you decided pride mattered more than love." The student in the corner was watching now, headphones off, clearly uncomfortable but unable to leave. Min-Jae lowered his voice. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But they're my children. I have a right." "You have no rights," Hannah said quietly. "The birth certificates list father as unknown. You've never paid child support. You've never made contact. Legally, you're nobody to them. That can change." She went very still. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating facts." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "These are papers for a paternity test. We can do it quietly, privately, or we can do it through the courts. Your choice." Hannah stared at the envelope like it was a weapon, which it was. "Why?" she whispered. "Why now? Why after all this time?" "Because I saw them," Min-Jae said. "And I realized what I'd done, what I'd lost, and I need to try to fix it. Some things can't be fixed. Maybe not. But I have to try." Hannah wiped her eyes with shaking hands. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger, colder. You walk out that door right now and never come back. I won't fight you. I won't pursue child support. I won't tell them who you are. We'll stay nothing in your world. That's the deal. No deal. Then I'll fight you, she said. I'll fight you with everything I have. I'll make this ugly and public and painful, and those boys will grow up knowing their father tried to tear apart the only family they've ever known. Min-Jae met her eyes, saw the steel beneath the tears. This wasn't the soft, trusting woman he'd married. This was someone who'd survived hell and built something from nothing, someone who would protect her children at any cost. I don't want to fight you, he said quietly. I want to know them. I want them to know me, and I want to help you. Help me? She laughed again, that same bitter sound. I don't need your help. We're fine. You're working 70-hour weeks in a cafe that barely makes profit. You're raising twin boys alone in a neighborhood that is filled with good people who actually care about us, Hannah interrupted. Don't you dare judge the life I built. I did it alone, without you, without anyone, and we're happy. Are they asking about their father? The question landed like a blow. Hannah's face crumpled slightly. That's not fair. It's a fair question. Do they ask? Sometimes, she whispered. Yes, they ask. What do you tell them? That their father made a mistake. She met his eyes. I never told them the mistake was not wanting them. I let them think it was something else. Something less cruel. Min-Jae felt something crack inside his chest. Thank you for that. I didn't do it for you, Hannah said. I did it for them. They stood in silence for a long moment. One meeting, Min-Jae said finally. Supervised, neutral location. Let me talk to them. Let me begin to make this right. And if I say no, then I pursue legal options, paternity test through the courts, custody evaluation. It will be messy and painful and public, and you'll hate me even more than you already do, but I'll do it. Hannah closed her eyes. When she opened them, the fury was gone. Just exhaustion remained. You really want this? You really want to be their father? Yes. Why? Because they're mine, Min-Jae said. And because I've spent 5 years building an empire that means nothing. And maybe, if I can be their father, I can be something other than what I've always been. You're a criminal, Hannah said quietly. I know what you really do, Min-Jae. The import-export business was always a lie. I'm not stupid. He didn't deny it. If you come into their lives, Hannah continued, that world comes with you. The danger, the violence, all of it. I'll keep them safe. Can you promise that? He wanted to say yes, wanted to guarantee their safety absolutely. But he'd learned, painfully, that certainty was a lie. I'll do everything in my power, he said instead. That's all I can promise. Hannah was quiet for a long time. Then she pulled out her phone. One meeting, this Saturday, 2 p.m. Echo Park, the playground near the lake. I'll bring the boys. You can talk to them for 1 hour. Then we reassess. Thank you. Don't thank me, Hannah said coldly. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because they deserve to know who their father is before they get old enough to resent me for keeping him away. But Min-Jae, if you hurt them, if you make them feel unwanted or unloved or not good enough, I will destroy you. I don't care how powerful you are. I will find a way. Min-Jae believed her. He left the envelope on the counter, the paternity test papers, and walked out of the cafe. As he reached his car, he heard her voice through the open door. Min-Jae? He turned. She was standing in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, looking small and fierce and unbreakable. They're good boys, she said. They're kind and smart and funny. They're everything I hoped they'd be. Please don't take that away from them. I won't, he said. But as he drove away, he wondered if that was a promise he could keep. Because everything he touched, he destroyed. And these were the two people he couldn't afford to destroy again. Saturday arrived too quickly. Min-Jae stood in the Echo Park playground parking lot 15 minutes early, watching families enjoy the afternoon sun. Couples pushed toddlers on swings. Kids climbed jungle gyms with careless confidence. Dogs barked and chased each other near the lake. Normal. All of it painfully, impossibly normal. He was wearing jeans, the first time in years, and a plain black t-shirt, trying to look approachable, unthreatening, like someone who belonged in a public park instead of in high-stakes negotiations or criminal boardrooms. At exactly 2 p.m., Hannah's old Honda pulled into the parking lot. She got out first, scanning the area with practiced wariness. Then she opened the back doors, and the boys tumbled out, a chaos of energy and questions. Can we go to the swings first? I want to feed the ducks. Mom, you said we could get ice cream after. One thing at a time, Hannah said patiently. She spotted Min-Jae, and her expression hardened. She said something to the boys that Min-Jae couldn't hear. They looked over at him, curious but not afraid. Hannah walked toward him alone first. Ground rules, she said quietly. You don't mention who you are. Not yet. You're just someone Mom knows. You're friendly, but not familiar. And if either of them seems uncomfortable, this ends immediately. Agreed. And Min-Jae? She met his eyes. They're going to ask you questions. Kids do that. Answer honestly but appropriately. Don't lie to them. They're smarter than you think. I won't lie. Hannah studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and waved the boys over. They approached with that unself-conscious confidence all children have before the world teaches them fear. Min-Jae's heart was pounding so hard he was sure they could hear it. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. They had his bone structure, his dark eyes, his serious expressions when they studied something new. But they had Hannah's warmth, her openness, her smile. Boys, this is Mr. Kang, Hannah said. He's an old friend of mine. He wanted to meet you. The quieter one, James, Min-Jae remembered from the report, hung back slightly. The louder one, Michael, stepped forward with easy confidence. Hi, do you like soccer? I do, Min-Jae said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Do you play? All the time. I'm going to be a professional player when I grow up. James wants to be a scientist, though. A paleontologist, James corrected quietly. I want to study dinosaurs. That's impressive, Min-Jae said, crouching down to their eye level. Paleontology requires a lot of patience and attention to detail. James blinked, surprised that an adult knew what paleontology was. Most people just say that's cool, he said. Well, I'm not most people. Are you from Korea? Michael asked. You look like you might be. Our teacher says we're Korean too, but we've never been there. Min-Jae glanced at Hannah. She was watching carefully, ready to intervene. I am from Korea, he said. Seoul. Have you ever wanted to visit? Mom says maybe someday, James said. But plane tickets are expensive. The casual mention of money, or lack of it, hit Min-Jae harder than any business negotiation ever had. Can you play soccer with us? Michael asked. Mom's terrible at it. She keeps kicking it the wrong way. I do not, Hannah protested. I'm just creatively strategic. The boys giggled. Min-Jae found himself almost smiling. I can play for a little while, he said. They ran toward an open grassy area, Michael already dribbling the ball, James following more carefully. Min-Jae walked alongside Hannah. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Hannah replied. We'll see how this goes. For the next hour, Min-Jae played soccer with his sons. Michael was aggressive, competitive, always trying to score. James was more strategic, thinking 3 moves ahead. They argued constantly but without real anger, the kind of bickering that comes from knowing someone completely. Min-Jae let them win more often than he should have. He answered their questions about Korea, about soccer, about what he did for work. Business stuff, mostly boring. He learned that Michael loved pizza, but hated mushrooms, that James could name 40 different dinosaur species, that they both wanted a dog, but their apartment didn't allow pets. He learned what he'd missed. Every birthday, every first step, every nightmare, every triumph. 5 years of their lives that he'd thrown away because he'd been too proud to question his own certainty. At one point, James stopped mid-game and looked at him seriously. Why did you want to meet us? The question froze everyone. Hannah tensed. Michael stopped dribbling. Min-Jae met James's eyes, his own eyes, staring back at him with unnerving intelligence. He could have lied, could have said something vague and meaningless, but Hannah had told him not to lie, and this child deserved better. Because I knew your mother a long time ago, Min-Jae said carefully, and I made a mistake that I'm trying to fix, and meeting you both seemed like a good place to start. What kind of mistake? James asked. The kind that hurt people I care about, the kind I regret. James considered this, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Okay, want to see me do a trick? He didn't press further, just moved on to demonstrating a soccer move with the casual resilience of childhood. Michael came over to Min-Jae and whispered conspiratorially, he's always asking questions like that. Mom says he's going to be a lawyer or a detective. What do you think you'll be? Min-Jae asked. Happy, Michael said simply. Mom says that's the most important thing. Something in Min-Jae's chest broke open. When the hour ended, Hannah called the boys over. They protested, standard end-of-fun complaints, but came anyway. Can Mr. Kang come back? Michael asked. He's actually good at soccer. We'll see, Hannah said. That means probably yes, James told Min-Jae seriously. When Mom says we'll see, it usually means yes, but she wants to think about it first. Min-Jae looked at Hannah. She was studying him with an unreadable expression. Can I? He asked quietly. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. Next Saturday. Same time. Same place. Thank you. She didn't respond, just gathered the boys and headed back to the car. But before she got in, she turned back. Min-Jae? They like you. That makes this harder. Harder how? Because now when you leave, and you will leave eventually, it's going to hurt them. She drove away before he could respond. Min-Jae stood in the parking lot and watched her car disappear into traffic. She was right to be cautious, right to protect them, right to assume he'd leave, because everyone in his life eventually left, or he pushed them away. That's how his world worked. But for the first time in his life, he wanted to be different. Not for himself, for them, for two boys who deserved better than a father who'd thrown them away, for a woman who'd built a life from nothing and still had the strength to let him try again. He drove back to Malibu and sat on the deck until sunset, thinking about James's serious questions and Michael's easy laughter and Hannah's warning that he'd eventually leave. Then he made a phone call he'd been avoiding. "Father," he said when Dae-jung answered in Seoul, "I need to talk to you about the business. The LA operations. What problems?" "No problems. But I'm making changes. I'm stepping back from day-to-day management, transitioning to more legitimate operations." Silence. Then his father's voice, cold with fury. "What?" "I'm done," Min-Jae said. "The criminal side, the violence, the risk. I'm out." "You're out when I say you're out. You don't make those decisions." "I just did." He hung up. His phone rang immediately. He ignored it. It rang 17 more times that night. He ignored all of them. He knew what would come next. Threats, attempts at manipulation, possibly actual violence if his father felt sufficiently betrayed. But for the first time in his life, Min-Jae didn't care. He'd made his choice: empire or sons, power or family. The world he'd always known or the world he wanted to build. He chose the second one, even if it cost him everything. The warning came on Thursday. Min-Jae was in a meeting with his Los Angeles operations managers when his phone buzzed with a message from his most trusted security chief in Seoul. "Your father sent people, 3 contractors, arrived in LAX this morning, asking about you, about a woman and children. This isn't a conversation." Min-Jae excused himself from the meeting and called immediately. "How serious?" "Very serious, sir. These aren't negotiators. These are cleaners." Cleaners. His father's term for people who eliminated problems permanently. "Do they have addresses?" "Not yet, but they're looking." Min-Jae hung up and immediately called a different number, the private security firm he'd used for sensitive protection contracts in the past. "I need full coverage on 3 targets, starting immediately. Former military level. No gaps in surveillance." He gave Hannah's address, the cafe address, the boys' school. Then he got in his car and drove straight to Pasadena. Hannah was closing up the cafe when he arrived. She saw him through the window, and her expression immediately shifted to alarm. "What's wrong?" she asked as she let him in. "You need to take the boys and leave Los Angeles tonight." "What? Why?" "My family knows about you, about them. And they're sending people who—" He stopped, tried to find a way to explain that wouldn't terrify her. Failed. "They're sending people who will hurt you to hurt me." Hannah went pale. "Because you've been seeing the boys?" "Because I told my father I'm leaving the business. He sees it as betrayal, and he knows the most effective way to punish me is through you." "No." Hannah's voice was shaking but firm. "No. You don't get to bring this into our lives. You don't get to make us run because of your choices. Hannah, I have a business here. The boys have school, friends, a life. You don't get to destroy that. I'm trying to protect you. By making us homeless again?" She laughed bitterly. "I've already slept in my car once because of you, Min-Jae. I'm not doing it again. I'll pay for everything. Hotels, moving costs. Whatever you need. I have security watching you right now. You have people watching my children without my permission." Min-Jae realized his mistake. "I'm keeping them safe." "No," Hannah said. "You're turning them into targets. That's different." She was right. He knew she was right, but he didn't have a better option. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "Walk away? Let them come? Hope my father's people won't actually hurt you?" "I want you to fix this," Hannah said. "You got us into this. You fix it. Handle your family, handle your business, and keep that world away from my sons. Our sons. Don't." Her voice broke. "Don't use that word like it gives you the right to drag them into danger." Min-Jae's phone buzzed, his security chief again. Contractors located the cafe address, moving in that direction. ETA 15 minutes. "They're coming here," Min-Jae said. "Now. You need to leave. Take the boys and go. I'll handle this." "Handle it how?" "However I have to." Hannah stared at him. Then she grabbed her keys and her phone. "I'm taking the boys to my friend Sarah's house in Long Beach. You have until tomorrow morning to make this right. If you don't, I'm calling the police. I don't care what it exposes. I don't care what happens to you. I will not let your world destroy my children." She left through the back door. Min-Jae waited. He turned off all the lights except one, sat at a table near the front window, made himself visible. They arrived 12 minutes later. 3 men in casual clothes, early 30s, military bearing poorly disguised by relaxed postures. They didn't come in immediately. Watched first, assessed, looked for secondary exits and potential problems. Professional, just as he'd expected. One of them made eye contact through the window. Recognition flickered. Min-Jae stood and walked to the door, unlocked it, stepped outside. "Gentlemen," he said in Korean, "I assume my father sent you." The lead contractor, the one who'd made eye contact, smiled slightly. "Mr. Kang, we were told you'd be difficult." "I'm not being difficult. I'm telling you to leave." "That's not how this works." The contractor glanced at his companions. "We have a job, location, and message." "What message?" "That family makes you weak. That betrayal has consequences. That you either come back to Seoul and resume your duties, or we remind you what you have to lose." Min-Jae's hands were steady. His voice was steady. Everything inside him was screaming. "The woman and children aren't here," he said. "They're protected. And if you go after them, I won't negotiate. I won't show mercy. I'll hunt down everyone my father loves, and I'll make sure he watches them suffer before I put him in the ground." The contractor's smile faded. "That's your father you're threatening." "That's my father I'm promising." They stared at each other. "We could take you now," the contractor said quietly. "Bring you back to Seoul. Force compliance." "You could try," Min-Jae agreed. "But I've trained with the same people you have. I know the same techniques, and I'm fighting for something that matters more than money or loyalty to an old man who beats children to make them strong." One of the other contractors shifted uncomfortably at that detail. "Walk away," Min-Jae continued. "Tell my father I'm out. Tell him I'll transfer full operational control to whoever he chooses to replace me. Tell him I'll even transfer most of the LA assets back to the organization. But tell him, if he sends anyone after that woman or those children again, the war that follows will destroy everything he's built. He won't accept that. Then he'll lose everything." The contractor studied him for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone and walked away, speaking rapidly in Korean. Min-Jae waited. 5 minutes later, the contractor returned. "Your father wants to speak to you. Now." He handed over the phone. Min-Jae took it and walked back inside the cafe. putting distance between himself and the contractors. Min-Jae. His father's voice was cold fury. You betray me for some American woman and bastard children? I betray you for a chance to be something other than what you made me, Min-Jae replied. I'm done, father. I'm out. You can have the empire. Just leave them alone. You think you can walk away? You think there are no consequences? I'm accepting the consequences. But so will you. If anything happens to Hannah or the boys, I'll burn everything down. Every operation, every connection, every secret we've kept for 30 years. I'll expose it all. You'd destroy yourself. Gladly, Min-Jae said. If it means they're safe. Silence. Then his father laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You're weak, just like I always feared. Love made you weak. No, Min-Jae said quietly. Love made me strong enough to walk away. That's something you never understood. He hung up. The contractors were still waiting outside. Min-Jae walked out and faced them. I need your word, he said, professional to professional, that you'll deliver my message and walk away. No surveillance, no follow-up, no moves against the woman or children. The lead contractor was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. You have my word. We're contractors, not murderers. We complete assignments or we don't take them. This one's done. They left. Min-Jae stood in the parking lot and waited until he was absolutely sure they were gone. Then he called his security chief. I need you to maintain coverage on Hannah Brooks and the children for the next 6 months. Full surveillance. Report any suspicious activity immediately. Money is no object. Understood, sir, he called Hannah. It's done. They're gone. You're safe. For how long? Her voice was exhausted. As long as I'm alive to prevent it. That's not good enough, Min-Jae. That's not a life, living under constant threat because your father might change his mind. I know. I'm working on a permanent solution. Which is? I don't know yet, he admitted. But I'll find one. She hung up without saying goodbye. Min-Jae drove to his attorney's office and spent the next 8 hours drafting documents. Transfer of operational control, asset liquidation agreements, severance contracts for everyone in his organization, and a will that left everything to Hannah and the boys. If his father killed him, at least they'd be financially secure. If his father honored the agreement, maybe he could build something new. By midnight, he was done. He drove to Long Beach and sat outside Sarah's house, watching for any sign of movement, any threat. Nothing. At dawn, Hannah came out, saw his car, walked over. Did you sleep out here? I wanted to make sure. She looked at him for a long time. Then she opened the passenger door and got in. The boys are asking about you, she said. Asking when you'll come back to play soccer. Do you want me to? I want them to be safe more than I want them to know their father, Hannah said. But I'm starting to realize I can't have both, not with you. I'm trying. I know, she interrupted. I know you're trying, but trying isn't enough when your family sends hitmen to my cafe, when my children have to hide because of who their father is. When every relationship in their life becomes a security risk. So what do you want me to do? She met his eyes. I want you to choose. Them or your world. Not halfway. Not I'll protect you while staying in the business. All in or all out. I already chose. I told my father I'm out. Words, Hannah said. He doesn't trust words. Neither do I. I need to see you actually walk away. Build something different. Prove that you meant what you said. How? I don't know, she admitted. But until you do, this, she gestured between them, isn't safe for them, and I won't sacrifice their safety for your redemption arc. She got out of the car and walked back to the house. Min-Jae sat there until Sarah came out to get the boys ready for school and gave him a look that clearly meant leave. He drove back to Malibu and stood on the deck watching the sunrise, thinking about choices and consequences and the price of wanting to be different. He'd walked away from his father. But until he walked away from everything his father's world represented, Hannah would never trust him. And she was right not to. 6 months later. The community center in Boyle Heights didn't look like much from the outside. Single-story concrete block construction, chain-link fence around a small playground. But inside it was warm and chaotic and alive. Teenagers playing basketball, elementary kids doing homework in the tutoring room, volunteers distributing food to families who needed it. Min-Jae stood in the director's office, signing the last of the paperwork. "You're sure about this?" The director, a woman named Rosa, who'd spent 30 years fighting for her community, asked. $3 million is a substantial donation. "I'm sure," Min-Jae said. "I want to fund the after-school programs, the job training, the tutoring, whatever you need to keep this place running and expand services." Rosa studied him. "Can I ask why?" "Most donors want publicity, their names on buildings. You've insisted on anonymity." "I'm not doing this for publicity," Min-Jae said. "I'm doing it because I spent most of my life taking from communities like this. I'd like to spend the rest giving back." She nodded slowly. "Well, we're grateful." "Whatever your reasons." He signed the last page and stood. "One more thing," he said. "I'd like to volunteer. Teach a class or help with the programs, something regular." "What can you teach?" "Business, finance, how to build something legitimate from nothing. I have experience with that now." He'd spent the last 6 months dismantling everything he'd built with his father, transferred operations back to Seoul, liquidated the criminal assets, established legitimate businesses, real estate development, import-export that actually imported and exported legal goods, venture capital investments in startups that didn't launder money. It had been brutal, expensive. Some people hadn't accepted the transition peacefully, but he'd done it. He was clean, legal, building something different, and he'd barely seen the boys the entire time. Hannah had let him visit twice, both supervised meetings in public parks. Both times the boys had asked when he'd come back. Both times Hannah had given him a look that said, "Not until you prove yourself." So he proved himself. Now he was standing in a community center in a neighborhood he once would have exploited, signing over millions of dollars and offering to teach kids how to build legitimate futures. "We meet on Tuesdays," Rosa said, 6 to 8 p.m. "Think you can handle teenagers who've seen everything and don't trust adults?" "I grew up not trusting adults," Min-Jae said. "I think we'll understand each other." He left the community center and drove to Pasadena. The cafe was busier than usual. Hannah had expanded, added outdoor seating, hired 2 part-time employees, started serving lunch. Min-Jae had quietly paid off the building's back taxes and arranged for the landlord to offer her a long-term lease at reduced rent. She didn't know he'd been involved. Better that way. He waited until the cafe was empty except for Hannah wiping down tables. "We need to talk," he said. She looked up. Something in her expression had softened in the last 6 months. The sharp fear had faded, replaced by cautious assessment. "Okay, talk. I've closed all ties with my father's organization, transferred everything back except legitimate holdings. I've established new businesses, legal ones. I've been volunteering at a community center in Boyle Heights, and I've had 3 private investigators and 2 forensic accountants verify that I'm completely separated from criminal operations. Hannah set down her cloth. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to see my sons, Min-Jae said. Not supervised visits in public parks, real time, regular time. I want to be part of their lives. And when your father decides he wants revenge, he won't. I gave him everything he wanted except me, and I've made it clear that if he ever threatens you or the boys, I have enough evidence to destroy him completely. Mutually assured destruction. He won't risk it. Hannah was quiet for a long time. They ask about you constantly, she said finally. James wants to know if you'll teach him Korean. Michael wants you to come to his soccer games. They've already figured out you're more than just Mom's friend. What did you tell them? The truth. That you're their father. That you made a terrible mistake 5 years ago. That you're trying to fix it now. She met his eyes. Was I wrong to tell them? No, Min-Jae said. They deserve the truth. They want to know why you weren't there before. Why you left us. This was the moment he'd been dreading, explaining to his children that he'd thrown them away before they were born, that he'd called their mother a liar. That pride and certainty had mattered more than love. What did you tell them? That sometimes people make choices based on fear, Hannah said. That your fear told you something impossible was happening, so you didn't believe it. That you've been trying to be brave enough to admit you were wrong. It was more generous than he deserved. Can I tell them myself? He asked. The real explanation. They're old enough to understand. Maybe, Hannah said. But not yet. First, you need to show them you're staying, that this isn't temporary, that you're choosing them every day, not just when it's convenient. How do I prove that? By being consistent. By showing up. By being present, even when it's hard. She paused. And by accepting that they might be angry with you, that it might take years for them to fully trust you. I can do that. Can you? Hannah challenged. Can you handle James asking why you weren't there when he was born? Can you handle Michael saying he wishes his dad was someone else? Can you handle them testing you, pushing you away, making you prove you deserve to be in their lives? Yes, Min-Jae said, because I do need to prove it, and I will, for as long as it takes. Hannah studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Dinner. Tomorrow night. 6 p.m. Our apartment. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and meatballs. You sit at our table. You help clean up. You act like a normal person, not a businessman or a criminal or anything else, just a father having dinner with his children. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. You haven't met them without me running interference. They're going to have questions you won't want to answer. She was right. The next evening, Min-Jae stood outside Hannah's apartment building with a bag of groceries. Fresh bread, salad ingredients, and cookies he'd picked up from a bakery in Los Feliz. Feeling more nervous than he'd ever felt negotiating with armed criminals. Hannah let him in. The apartment was small but warm. Photos on every wall, artwork covering the refrigerator, books stacked on every available surface. The boys were setting the table. They looked up when he entered. Hi, Mr. Kang, Michael said immediately. Mom says you're our dad. Is that true? Yes, Min-Jae said. It's true. James studied him seriously. Where have you been? Making mistakes, Min-Jae said. And trying to fix them. That's what Mom said too. James tilted his head. Are you staying this time? Yes. Promise? Min-Jae crouched down so they were eye level. I promise. And if I break that promise, you're allowed to be angry with me. You're allowed to tell me I failed. You're allowed to not forgive me. Okay? James considered this. Then he nodded. Okay. Want to see my dinosaur collection? Just like that, the interrogation was over. Children's capacity for acceptance, for moving forward, for giving second chances. Dinner was chaotic and normal and perfect. Michael talked non-stop about soccer. James explained the difference between different types of dinosaurs with scientific precision. Hannah mediated arguments and served food and looked at Min-Jae across the table with an expression that was almost forgiveness. After dinner, the boys showed him their room, bunk beds covered with Star Wars sheets, a bookshelf overflowing with stories, a desk where they did homework. Do you have kids at your house? Michael asked. No, Min-Jae said. Just me. That sounds lonely, James said seriously. It has been, Min-Jae admitted. That's why I'm glad I found you. We're glad too, Michael said. Then with the blunt honesty of childhood. But we're still mad you weren't there before. I know. I'm mad at me too. Good, James said. Mom says people who can't admit they made mistakes are dangerous. Your mom is right about that. When it was time to leave, Hannah walked him to the door. That went better than I expected, she said. They're amazing, Min-Jae replied. You did an incredible job raising them. We, Hannah corrected quietly. If you're staying, we're raising them, together. That means you don't get to just be the fun dad who shows up for good parts. You help with homework. You handle bedtime battles. You show up when they're sick or scared or difficult. I want that, Min-Jae said. All of it. Even the part where they scream they hate you. Even that. Hannah smiled slightly. Then welcome to parenthood. It's exhausting and frustrating and the best thing you'll ever do. Over the next 6 months, Min-Jae learned she was right about all of it. He learned that James had nightmares about dinosaurs coming to life and needed someone to sit with him until he fell back asleep. He learned that Michael cried after soccer games when his team lost and needed to be reminded that failure was part of learning. He learned that both boys fought constantly, but loved each other fiercely. He attended parent-teacher conferences, helped with science projects, drove them to practices and playdates, sat through terrible elementary school performances where both boys forgot their lines and laughed through the whole thing. He taught them Korean phrases, told them stories about Seoul, explained the parts of his past he could explain without terrifying them. And slowly, impossibly, they became a family. Not the family he'd imagined, not the family he thought he wanted. Something better, something real. One evening, 9 months after that first dinner, James asked the question Min-Jae had been dreading. Dad? James called him that now, casually, like it had always been true. Why didn't you want us before? They were in Griffith Park, the same place Min-Jae had first seen them. Michael was kicking a soccer ball. Hannah was reading on a bench nearby. And James was sitting next to Min-Jae, serious and waiting. I was told I couldn't have children, Min-Jae said carefully. The doctors said it was impossible. So when your mom told me she was pregnant, I didn't believe her. I thought she was lying. But she wasn't. No, she wasn't. The doctors were wrong, and I chose to believe them instead of believing her. Why? Because I was afraid, Min-Jae admitted. I was afraid of being wrong, afraid of hoping for something impossible, and that fear made me cruel to the person I loved most. James processed this. Do you still love Mom? Min-Jae looked over at Hannah. She was watching them, close enough to intervene if needed, but giving them space. "Yes," he said. "I do." "Does she love you?" "I don't know," Min-Jae said honestly. "I hurt her very badly. Sometimes hurt is hard to forgive." "But you're trying to fix it?" "Every day." James nodded. Then he leaned against Min-Jae's shoulder. Casual, trusting, completely devastating. "I'm glad you're here now," he said quietly. Min-Jae had to swallow hard before he could respond. "Me too." That night, after the boys were in bed, Hannah made tea, and they sat on her small balcony watching the city lights. "James asked me why I didn't believe you," Min-Jae said. "About the pregnancy." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That I was afraid and proud and wrong, that I chose certainty over faith, that I hurt you because I couldn't admit I might not know everything." Hannah was quiet for a long time. "I used to think I'd never forgive you," she said finally. "For that day. For throwing me out. For 5 years of raising them alone while you lived in your mansion, pretending we didn't exist. I'd understand if you never did. But then I watched you change," she continued. "Watched you actually walk away from everything you'd built. Watched you show up for every bedtime, every tantrum, every boring parent-teacher conference. Watched you teach Michael that losing doesn't make you a failure. Watched you help James with his science project at 2 in the morning because he was worried it wasn't good enough. And I realized something." "What?" "That the man I married didn't exist yet," Hannah said. "He was potential, promise, but not reality. The man sitting next to me right now is real. He's imperfect and still learning, and probably always going to struggle with pride and control issues. But he's trying, and he's staying." "I'm not going anywhere," Min-Jae said. "I know." She turned to face him. "So I think, maybe, I'm ready to try again. Not as we were. We can't be those people anymore. But as who we are now. 2 people raising 2 incredible boys together. 2 people building something different. Different how?" "Honest," Hannah said. "No secrets, no separate worlds. You tell me when your past catches up to you. I tell you when I'm scared you'll leave. We figure it out together." "I can do that." "Can you?" She met his eyes. "Because the second you pull away, the second you go back to handling everything alone, this ends. I need a partner, Min-Jae. Not a protector, not a provider. A partner." "Then that's what I'll be," he said. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking tea, watching the city. "The boys want to go to Korea," Hannah said eventually. "Meet their grandparents. See where you grew up." "My father is their grandfather," she interrupted, "and they have a right to know that side of their family, even if it's complicated." "It's more than complicated. It's dangerous." "Then we make it safe," Hannah said. "We set boundaries. We go on our terms. We show them their heritage without exposing them to your father's world." She paused. "Unless you think that's impossible." "With my father, everything is impossible until it's done." "Then let's do it," Hannah said. "Let's stop letting fear make decisions for us." 6 months later, they went to Seoul. Min-Jae's father met them at a neutral location, a traditional restaurant in Gangnam, private room, no security except Min-Jae's people. Dae-jung looked older, thinner. The fury that had defined him seemed to have burned down to embers. The boys were nervous, but curious. Hannah was protective, but open, and Min-Jae stood between his past and his future, hoping they wouldn't destroy each other. "So these are my grandsons," Dae-jung said in Korean. Min-Jae translated. We're James and Michael, Michael said in halting Korean. They'd been learning. It's nice to meet you, sir. Something flickered in Dae-jung's expression, not quite warmth, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, perhaps, or respect for the effort. They ate. The boys asked questions about Korea. Hannah explained American life. Dae-jung told stories about Min-Jae as a child, edited, sanitized, but real. It wasn't healing, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. As they left, Dae-jung pulled Min-Jae aside. You gave up everything for them, he said in Korean. I gave up nothing that mattered, Min-Jae replied. I gained everything that does. His father studied him, then nodded slowly. Maybe you're not weak after all, he said. Maybe you're the strongest one in this family. It was the closest to approval Min-Jae had ever received from his father. He'd take it. They flew back to Los Angeles 3 days later. The boys were exhausted and happy. Hannah fell asleep on Min-Jae's shoulder during the flight. And Min-Jae sat there, surrounded by his family, and felt something he'd spent his entire life avoiding. Peace. Not certainty. Not control. Not the cold satisfaction of winning negotiations or eliminating enemies. Just peace. The quiet knowledge that he'd chosen right. That he was where he belonged. That the children he'd sworn could never exist were sleeping across the aisle, and the woman he'd destroyed and rebuilt a life with trusted him enough to rest against him. When they landed at LAX, James woke up first. Dad? He said sleepily. Yeah, buddy? Are we home now? Min-Jae looked at Hannah, at Michael, at James's serious eyes waiting for an answer. Yeah, he said. We're home. And for the first time in his life, he meant it. Not a house, not a location, but a family. Imperfect and complicated and built from the ruins of his worst mistakes. Home. The end.